Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our complimentary webinar series for U.S. federal government contractors. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. today. This webinar series will run for 15 weeks or on 15 Wednesdays as we cover subcontracting opportunities within each of the 15 federal departments. As usual, all webinars are complimentary. You can find the schedule, registration links, and recordings on our website under the subcontracting section. Our data partner each week is GovSpend, formerly FedMine, and our legal perspective will be covered by a rotating government contracts attorney each Wednesday. So a little bit more about us. As you can see on the slide, we provide the following services for federal contractors, including product, service, and software firms across the globe. You can find more information about us on our website. Our webinars and newsletters reach a vast array of federal contractors, and our YouTube channel has now almost 600 complimentary webinars. So please follow our channel, give our videos a like or a comment. We also offer advertising opportunities, including in this series. So if your organization is interested in reaching federal contractors, you can sponsor an event, our webinars, advertise in our newsletter, or have us post your promotional information on LinkedIn. Contact us at hello@jenniferschaus.com for pricing and our media kit. Please join us on Monday, December 12th at the Kennedy Center for our annual holiday soiree. We expect over 200 attendees. Federal departments and corporate sponsors will be announced as they confirm. Right now, we have sponsorships from BidSpeed and the Virginia PTAC. So registration links are within the PowerPoint and also on our website under the Events tab. All right, and now we'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors and organizations that help make this particular series possible. So a special thanks to Tom Johnson and the team at Set Aside Alert for posting this webinar series in their newsletter. Please visit setasidealert.com to learn about their services for small businesses. Additionally, we'd like to thank GovEvents and also Fairfax County for sharing this webinar series on their public calendars. Please visit their websites and calendars for other related events. Next, we'd like to thank the Virginia PTAC. Virginia PTAC is based out of GMU in Fairfax, Virginia, and offers free one-on-one counseling on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on your business location. So if you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to contact the PTAC. And thanks also to our friends at BidSpeed. The BidSpeed platform helps you win and increase your probability of winning government contracts. They have opportunities from every federal, state, and local public source in the United States. So you're looking for a compliance matrix, a proposal template, a strategic teaming partner, or details on an expiring contract, BidSpeed can help. BidSpeed is an official partner of the SBA's 7J Management and Technical Assistance Program. Contact BidSpeed at the email or phone number here to learn more. And next, we have a message from Government Marketing University. Washington Technology provides a direct line to the contractor executives who need cutting-edge IT systems and solutions to serve the largest customer in the world, the government market. Washington Technology's goal is to help attendees hear from Justice Department leaders, leverage IT to modernize operations, engage in discussions about upcoming initiatives, analyze how contractors can support their department's mission. Our expert coverage and analysis fuels strategic decisions around partnering, RFPs, and resource development, enabling readers to build relationships, bid smartly, and win contracts. GovExec is ready to welcome you in Tyson's Corner on December 1st. Register today at events.bizzabo.com/DOJ. All right, and today we're here to dig into subcontracting opportunities at the Department of Labor. So let's take a quick look at our agenda. As you can see, today we'll start with our panelist introductions. We'll close out with legal insights as always. So our first panelist today is Ms. Archisa Meehan, representing GovSpend. GovSpend is the go-to resource for finding federal contracting opportunities. So please contact Archisa for more information about the GovSpend platform. Thank you for being with us today, as always.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And our legal speaker today is Joshua Turner of the law firm Perkins Coie. Thanks for being with us, Joshua. Okay. All right, so let's kick this off with the mission statement from the Department of Labor. I won't be reading this off to you. We've highlighted some keywords there for you. It's really important that you take into account the mission statement before even trying to work within each of these departments. All right, and we've also listed here the various agencies and services within the Department of Labor. We encourage you to spend some time on each of the services websites, learn more about their role and specific missions as well. And then I'd like to draw your attention to these important links. First, we have the link to the main department website, as well as to the department's small business office. Next, we have there the procurement forecast to understand what the department is buying, when they're buying it, how much they're buying, and if any specific set aside or contract vehicle may be used. And then lastly, that last link there is the SBA scorecard, which can help you understand the small business contracting trends and what dollars are being won by women, veterans, hub zone firms, and other disadvantaged businesses. So with that, let's take a look at the top 10 vendors for the Department of Labor. I've listed them here, but I won't read these off to you because in just a second, Archisa is going to go through the top 5 in a lot more detail. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Archisa.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Archisha Meehan, and I'm the Director of Federal Go-to-Market at GovSpend. Basically, FedMind provides federal business intelligence, and last year with the acquisition by GovSpend, we now provide the best in federal and state and local information and business intelligence that helps our companies grow. Today, we are absolutely focusing on subcontracting and how companies can use the subcontracting and data successfully as part of their growth strategy. So just a little bit about the data. So the data that we're presenting today, the prime contract information comes from FPDS that we update on a nightly basis. And the subcontract data comes from USA Spending, which gets its data from FSRS. I also want you all to keep in mind that the subcontract data is typically self-reported by the prime and in some cases by the sub. And there are two sources for subcontract data. The federal government and the SBA typically look at the subcontract data that is in ESRS. However, that data set is not made public at this point. Hence, we use the self-reported data that is in FSRS. So a couple of things before we sort of get into some of the companies. How do you use the data that is made available? So as a small business, not only do we want to know the top primes that are winning contracts and the type of work that they're doing, but we also want to understand who are they working with in terms of the subcontract. Does the prime contract have a subcontract plan requirement? Is that data made public? And I would always encourage all of you as you decide and you create your strategy, use filters not only of agencies, but of keywords and socioeconomic categories and things like that. Or NAICS codes, any multitude of filters that you want to be more focused as you create your strategy. And the other thing is also that a lot of times, even if there isn't a plan requirement, a subcontract plan requirement, you can absolutely talk to the existing companies that are winning those prime contracts, especially if you're in the same line of work. Okay, so we're now going to focus on, this search is really, I just looked at FY 2022 and looked at the top 5 vendors. Of course, this is at the Department of Labor. It's not filtered by any keywords or NAICS codes or socioeconomic status. And the idea really is to provide you with some information so that you can have a meaningful conversation with the prime, specifically their small business officers. So let's look at the top 5 companies within the Department of Labor. So the first one is management and training. Here's the link to their website. The next slide. And this is where you could reach out to them and see who their small business office is. Next slide. So as you could see here, this agency is typically, the Department of Labor is their largest client, with Homeland Security also being another one of their clients. Within the Department of Labor, where they won $227 million last fiscal year, they work with the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management. Next slide. The work that they do, as you can see, is for the operations of various Job Corps centers. And as you can further see, there is a subcontract plan requirement. So this is the type of information that is available. In many cases, you can actually see the original RFP, gives you a better idea of the type of work that's there. So when you decide to have a conversation with these companies, you know that there are not only is there a subcontract plan requirement, but that there's you know what the requirements of that contract could be. So the next slide. This is also further looking at by NAICS code, how their work has been classified, and the work at Department of Labor falls under the other technical and trade school services NAICS code. And you could also see that they have received some subcontract work from Train US as also Hawk Contracting Group. Again, this is the type of information that can be used as you create your strategy and as you decide to work with this company, or at least reach out to them, going with the understanding of what they do and what are the contract requirements. Next slide. The second company is Adams and Associates. Next slide. Has the link to reach out to them to register or just create those conversations. Next slide. Again, in this case, you can see that this company also has contracts for operations within the various offices. Also, to do work at the Job Corps centers also is part of the work that they do. And they won, this Adams and Associates won basically $185 million in FY22 at the Department of Labor, specifically with the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management. Next slide. And these are some of the subcontractors that they worked with in the last fiscal year. You actually could get into the details and get a better understanding of the type of services that they provided to Adams and Associates. The next slide is going to give you more information on the other subcontractors that they have worked with, and this is for FY21. Again, gives you a lot more information once you're able to drill in, where it's linked with not only it's linked with the prime contract and gives you more description of what each of these subcontractors have provided. This is just to show you the type of information that is available that can be used by you to not only understand the companies that the Adams is working with, but also understand the type of work and the value of the subcontract. So let's go to the next company, I believe, which is Serato Corporation. Next slide. And here is the link for you to go in and see how to work with them. Next slide. So again, with Serato, they specifically work with the Department of Labor. And you could see that in FY22, they won $114 million. In this case, they have won some contracts as a hub zone, as also a small business set aside. So always interesting to see that, because that gives us that knowledge that we need to even get further understanding of the type of work that they might have or the work that they might need to perform with other companies. Let's go to the next slide. In this case, again, you could see that the work is related to various Job Corps centers. There's some CRA funding. So again, gives you a much better idea of the work that the company is doing. They are also working with a couple of subcontractors that has been reported. I think the last time they reported any subcontractors was way back in FY20. And the next code that they are working with is again related to other technical and trade schools. Next slide. The fourth company that we are going to talk a little bit about is Career Systems Development Corporation. The next slide gives you the link to get in touch with them. Next slide. And again, for this company too, the Department of Labor is their only client. FY21, they won $144 million, but FY22 saw that drop to $89 million. And again, the type of work that they're doing falls under the NAICS code for other technical and trade schools. Next slide. Again, you could see that the top type of work that they're doing is based in Job Corps, training programs across various places. In this case, it seems to be more San Diego and based in San Jose. And you could further go in when you go into transactional details, whether you use a service such as FedMine, or even if you look at the data in FPDS, you'll see that there is a subcontract plan requirement. Next slide. The last company that we're going to cover is Booz Allen. Next slide. Here is a link for you to reach out and register with them. Next slide. So Booz Allen, of course, does a lot of work, but in this case, you could see that I'm just going to focus in on the contracts that they've done for the Department of Labor, which in FY22 was $87 million, which definitely has gone up from FY21. Next slide. Now, compared to the other four companies that did a lot of work that was Job Corps based and the NAICS code for trade schools, with Booz Allen, they're doing a little bit different type of work with that is focused more on the financial management systems and operations and maintenance for the same. Also, they seem to have won a contract for the newly designed enrollment services system. So, definitely a little bit different work with Booz Allen. And in this case, you could actually see some of the subcontracts that they are working with, whether it's Kofax or CETA Business Concepts, Cotton and Company. You actually have more visibility in this case for the subcontractors that they're working with. Next slide. And I think that's the end of my covering the top 5 companies that are doing work with the Department of Labor. Again, you just want to keep in mind, that as you use the data that is available, I always would recommend you to fine tune and filter your searches based on the type of work that you do, and be a lot more focused and gather the information not only on the company that you want to meet, but the work that they're doing within a specific agency to allow for the most fruitful conversations. And I know, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you. Thanks, Madeline.
Thanks so much, Archisa. Thank you for all of the data and your insights, of course. As she said, you can get in touch with her. I'll put Archisa's email at the end of this presentation. So now we're going to go quickly through some marketing best practices. We've listed here the basics for marketing your services to the top primes. Most importantly, you should use the tools available on sam.gov or the GovSpend platform to conduct research on the primes and expiring contracts. Use the Prime's website, their newsletter and events calendars, as well as their social media. Learn more about them and then connect. Make sure that you're doing that background information first. That's definitely vital. Lastly, set yourself apart and lead with your capabilities, not your socioeconomic status. Bring a specific opportunity to the Prime and work with the SBLOs. Those are the Small Business Liaison Officers. They're your advocates, and we've provided the links for the top 5 to get in touch with them. So make sure you're using those resources. And now we'll be moving over to legal considerations and best practices. Please note that we've covered the federal acquisition regulations on the Department of Labor earlier this year, so you can find the YouTube recording here on the screen. You can also get to it from our website. And now I'm going to hand it over to Joshua. Thank you for being with us. Just let me know when you're ready for the next slide.
Sounds good. We can move to the next slide, please, Madeline. All right, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Turner, and I would first like to thank Jennifer Schaus and Associates for having me and allowing me to present today. It's always a privilege to talk about subcontracting. It's a topic that I work with a lot, topic that's near and dear to my heart. So with respect to my background, I wear a couple of hats. So first and foremost, I'm a government contract attorney at Perkins Coie. I think we mentioned that earlier in the presentation. Excuse me. And I also teach government contracts at the North Carolina Central University School of Law, which is my alma mater. So prior to my time in the private sector, I practiced government contracts law for the Department of Defense, more specifically the Defense Logistics Agency, and then I went over to the Department of Energy. So I'm drawing from that my experience in those roles to hopefully make this presentation as informative as possible. So with respect to the pertinent considerations, give me 1 second. Okay, sorry. So I always like to start off with our roadmap, with what we'll cover, and especially when we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So we're going to be talking about the pertinent definitions, because if we're going to be talking about subcontracting, it becomes really important to know, at a fundamental level, what a contract is, what a subcontract is, and also what a subcontractor is, as we'll be referencing those throughout the presentation. We'll also be talking about the difference between teaming agreements and a subcontract, and the implications of teaming agreements and subcontracts on privity and the relationship with the parties to the contracts with the federal government, and also teaming agreement enforceability. We'll also talk about one of the most popular topics today, which is flow-down clauses, and focusing on the subcontractor's perspective with respect to those flow-down clauses, and when those clauses must be flowed down, and the implications of flowing down optional clauses. We'll also talk about terminations and the difference between a termination for convenience, a termination for default, and the subcontractor's perspective when reviewing contracts or proposed subcontracts that contain termination for convenience and termination for default contract clauses. And lastly, we'll discuss disputes between subcontractors and prime contractors. And again, we'll round off our discussion with privity and choice of law and choice of venue. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with this substantive discussion. All right, so here are the definitions of the 3 words that you'll hear the most throughout this presentation. The first word is subcontract, which is a contract to furnish supplies and services for performance of the prime contract or subcontract. And pertinent to today's discussion, the term contract, as defined by FAR 2.101, is a mutually binding legal relationship obligating the seller or a subcontractor to furnish supplies or services, including construction, and the buyer or the prime contractor or higher tier subcontractor to pay for them. And a supplier, distributor, vendor, or firm that furnishes supplies or services to or for a prime contractor or another higher tier subcontractor is considered a subcontractor. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk about teaming agreements, and I think it's helpful to first look at the definition of subcontracts, which we just spoke about in the previous slide, and compare those to the definition of teaming agreements. So as we recently discussed, a subcontract is a contract to furnish supplies or services for the performance of the prime contract, and by contrast, there are two types of teaming agreements which we typically see. So a teaming agreement. So we see a teaming agreement with an arrangement where two or more companies form a partnership or a joint venture to act as a potential prime contractor together, or a potential prime contractor agrees with one or more companies to have them act as a subcontractor under a specified government contract or acquisition program when awarded. So depending on, which one of these relationships with the government that you have, or which one of these types of contracts or subcontracts that you have, the concept of privity or the relationship with the federal government may change, right? So when we're looking at a subcontractor or a subcontract, the subcontractor does not have a direct relationship or privity with the federal government. So when we hear the words direct relationship, we're thinking about the word privity. And a subcontractor does not have privity with the federal government. When we're talking about a joint venture, however, each member of the joint venture has privity or that direct relationship with the federal government. So for example, when let's say three contractors come together and they form a joint entity, each member of that joint entity or that joint venture, each member of that joint venture will have a direct relationship with the federal government. Lastly, when a potential prime contractor agrees with one or more other companies to have them serve as a subcontractor under a specified government contract, upon award, only the prime contractor has privity with the federal government. So that subcontractor, upon award, will not have privity with the federal government. So this obviously begs the question, why is privity so important, right? So we'll discuss this in greater detail when we talk about disputes in the later slides, but privity is so important because if a company, or it's for when a company is seeking to file a claim directly against the federal government during subcontract performance. So without that privity, a company or a subcontractor is not going to be able to file a claim directly against the federal government during subcontract performance, absent other considerations, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And subcontractors should be aware of an issue that we see with these types of teaming agreements, wherein a prime contractor agrees, with a company that the company will serve as a subcontractor upon award. So some states view these types of agreements as what we call a gratuitous promise or an agreement to agree. An agreement to agree is not a contract because fundamentally a contract requires an offer, acceptance, a mutual understanding and agreement of the contract terms and consideration. And agreements to enter into a future subcontract, they often lack that mutual understanding element to satisfy the contract requirements. So some states render these types of teaming agreements as unenforceable. And you'll see that we've cited the Futrin Tech case, which stands for the proposition that companies that enter into these types of teaming agreements in Virginia may face enforceability issues with these types of teaming agreements. So for best practice, subcontractors should understand their relationship with the prime contractor, and then they should reach out to legal counsel to ensure that teaming agreement enforceability and draft the subcontract itself simultaneous to drafting the teaming agreement to demonstrate, the mutual understanding and agreement with the subcontract terms that's necessary to demonstrate the intent to be bound, such that the contract can be legally enforceable. Next slide, please. All right, so next we're going to talk about the most popular topic, which is the flow down clauses. So these are clauses that are in the prime contract that are flowed down from that prime contract to the subcontract, such that they are applicable to the subcontractor. So here's the issue, and most likely you've taken a look at, or taken an initial look at the subcontract and found a long list of prime contract clauses that appear to flow down or to apply to the subcontract. And these clauses will typically come from the Federal Acquisition Regulation or the specific agency, that's the specific awarding agency that's awarding the contract at issue. And the issue with these flow down clauses is that not all of them that are contained in that initial subcontract are required to be flowed down. Not all of them are mandatory flow down clauses. So these unnecessary clauses will sometimes create an increased subcontractor compliance burden, right? So here's some of the steps that we recommend, or that we recommend for subcontractors to consider, as they're viewing these proposed subcontracts. First off, check the date of the cited clauses to make sure that the most recent versions of the clauses are cited. A lot of times, it's very easy to cite an outdated FAR provision or a FAR clause. So you want to make sure that you have the most recent versions of the flow down clauses in your subcontract. Typically toward the bottom of the clause, you'll see a section labeled subcontract. And that will talk about whether or not the clause itself has to be flowed down to all subcontracts, or to which tier of subcontracts. So by way of example, you'll see the anti-kickback clause at FAR 52203-7. So at the bottom of that clause, you'll see that it says the contractor agrees to incorporate the substance of this clause in all subcontracts under this contract that exceed the threshold specified in the FAR on the date of subcontract award. So you'll look for language like that, right? So if there is no language like that talks about whether or not the clause has to be flowed down, then that clause in and of itself becomes negotiable, right? Because if it's not mandatory, then it's optional. So the subcontractor is going to have to decide whether they prefer that optional clause, or whether they want that clause to be subject to negotiation, or the subject of negotiation. And there may be optional clauses that are preferred, like for example, the termination for convenience, which we'll talk about in the next slide. You want to articulate, what are the instances where termination for convenience can occur? What is the subcontractor entitled to, when the termination for convenience happens? So these are some things that the subcontractor wants to think through when reviewing some of these clauses that have been flowed down, especially when the prime contractor attempts to flow down the entire list of clauses in the prime contract. Because then there's case law out there that essentially says that that's not sufficient to effectively bind the subcontractor to everything that has been flowed down. So the best practice should be subcontractors should analyze each clause that's been flowed down in their subcontracts for applicability, note the mandatory clauses, retain the optional preferred clauses, and negotiate the optional unpreferred clauses. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to go into our discussion on terminations, and we're going to talk about two types of terminations. So there's termination for default, which occurs when a party to the contract fails to comply with the contract terms as they're set forth in the contract, and one party decides to end the contractual relationship. And then we're going to talk about termination for convenience. So this termination for convenience is something that's specific to government contracts, and that occurs when the government no longer has a need for the products or services for which it originally contracted. So there's two perspectives here, right? There's a prime contractor perspective, which we're not as concerned about, but I think it helps to contrast it against the subcontractor perspective. So the prime contractor perspective is to ensure that the prime contractor can terminate the subcontract for convenience if that prime contract is also terminated for convenience. But the subcontractor's perspective, which is important here, is to make sure that that the subcontract contemplates a termination for convenience and also sets forth the cost that the subcontractor will be entitled to if the subcontract is terminated for convenience. So a termination for convenience clause is one of those clauses that, you know, it may not be mandatory in the subcontract, but the subcontractor wants to make sure that when looking in when working under a government contract, that it is sure to focus on or to ensure that that termination for convenience clause is there and articulates exactly what will happen when a termination for convenience occurs. And also, the subcontractor wants to consider limiting the instances in which a termination for convenience can be used, and, you know, perhaps limiting it to only being used when the federal government issues a termination for convenience to the prime contractor. So that's also another consideration that we see and that we talk with our clients through. Let's see. With respect to a termination for default, the subcontractor may want to focus on when that termination for default can happen. So perhaps we add a notice requirement in the contract that has to occur before there's a termination for convenience. Maybe we also add a cure requirement, a notice and an opportunity to cure whatever the default is or whatever the subcontractor's alleged failure to adhere to the contract terms. We want to have the subcontractor or give the subcontractor an opportunity to fix whatever the issue is that the prime is alleging that it has with the subcontractor prior to the termination for default. So maybe those are some things that we want to think about as we're negotiating the subcontract terms. And we want to make sure that the termination clauses are reciprocal as possible. So if there's a termination, if the prime has the ability to terminate a contract in a certain instance, the sub wants to also negotiate its ability to terminate the contract in the same instance. So from a best practice perspective, the subcontractors, or from the subcontractor's perspective, the contract should not permit a termination for convenience unless the government issues the same to the prime contractor. The subcontractor should also contain, or the subcontract, excuse me, should also contain a very clear process for a default termination that at a minimum includes notice requirements and a reasonable opportunity to cure. Next slide, please. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk about disputes. So disputes between a subcontractor and a prime contractor are governed by state law. So the important caveat or thing to think about with respect to disputes between a subcontractor and a prime contractor are going to be the choice of law and the choice of venue. When we're talking about the choice of law, that's going to be what state governs, right? So, you know, if you have a contractor that has a headquarters in Washington State, and you have the prime contractor. So if you have a subcontractor that has a headquarters in Washington State, and you have a prime contractor with the headquarters in Miami, Florida, then the choice of law is going to be very important there, right? Because if there's a dispute and the subcontractor has to travel from Washington State all the way to Miami, Florida, because Florida law governs, and that's going to be a significant burden on the subcontractor. So it's going to be really important for the subcontractor to look at that choice of law provision and negotiate that choice of law provision to perhaps being in Washington State, where where the subcontractor is headquartered, or in a state that's an equal distance between the prime contractor and the subcontractor. So that's what we're thinking about when we're talking about choice of law. And then choice of venue, the subcontractors wants to think about whether there's a mandatory arbitration clause in there, or whether it's governed by or if you can adjudicate any disputes before a state court. So those are the things that we're thinking about when we're talking about a choice of venue that the subcontractor needs to consider. And also, what if the government's the one that causes the dispute? So what if the dispute is not necessarily directly between the prime and the subcontractor? What if the subcontractor has an issue directly with the government? And that's where that concept that we talked about earlier today of privity comes into play, right? The direct relationship with the federal government. So the subcontractor typically has no privity, or the subcontractor does not have any privity with the federal government in this circumstance, right? No direct relationship. So the subcontractor cannot file a claim directly against the federal government for example, its failure to timely pay the prime contractor, and by extension, the prime contractor's failure to pay the sub. So in these instances where the subcontractor cannot file a claim directly to the federal government, the subcontractor will essentially communicate with the prime contractor to seek for the prime contractor to sponsor its claim, right? So that essentially means that the prime contractor will submit the subcontractor's claim to the government on behalf of the prime contractor and certify to that claim's accuracy, right? But often an issue comes up because the prime contractor with a direct relationship with the federal government does not want to ruin its relationship or harm its relationship with the federal government, right? Because the prime contractor is the one that's communicating with the federal government every day. The prime contractor has privity or direct relationship with the federal government. So that presents an issue, right? Because, like, for example, if there's a pay when paid clause in a subcontract, that paid when paid clause is going to say that the subcontractor is not owed any payment until the prime contractor is paid from the federal government, right? So if the federal government does not timely pay the prime contractor, then the subcontractor is also not getting paid. However, the subcontractor is still required to perform in accordance with the subcontract. So that puts the subcontractor in a rough position because the subcontractor, is not bringing in any revenue, but it's still required to perform. So in those instances, a subcontractor may want to file a claim against the federal government for payment so that it can continue performance. But then we have something called the Severin Doctrine, which says that the government does not owe the prime contractor any money unless the prime contractor has an obligation to pay the subcontractor. So there's a lot of parties. That moving back and forth here, but it's important for the subcontractor and the prime contractor to understand what will happen in the event of a dispute, and the subcontractor must understand, the clauses that are in its contract that may prevent it from receiving payment, and then the clauses that will prevent it, and then the contract law that prevents it from filing a claim directly against the government. So the best practice here is going to be to carefully review disputes, the disputes portion of the subcontract, speaking to, among other things, the choice of law, choice of venue, and pay when paid provisions, and to ensure that the subcontractor understands the privity position that it has with the federal government, to know its avenues to recover if any disputes arise during subcontract performance. And that's all I have. And thanks again to Jennifer Jennifer Schaus and Associates for the opportunity, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for all of your insights. We really appreciate you joining us today. There on the screen, you can find Joshua's contact information as well as Archisa's if you have any any questions about the GovSpend platform. The recording from today's webinar will be available within about 24 hours on our YouTube channel, and the slides will be available as well on slideshare.net. So please, we hope that you can join us next week. We'll be covering subcontracting opportunities at the Department of State. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.